Nidus Breachcast, the world's first identity management app made exclusively for identity experts and product owners, is available in the iOS App Store now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, CIO and co-founder of Nidus, and today we're going to talk about how Google just announced that over 25% of all the code that they make today is generated by AI. So if you've been following the news, Google has been doing layoffs and transitions to offshore workers to reduce their costs for a developer standpoint. Like back in, I think it was like May or so, they announced they laid off all their Python developers. Well, really, they laid them off in the US and then they hired a few in Germany and said, hey, we're just going to hire over there because they're cheaper. Meanwhile, in February, Google announced an internal LLM called Goose, which is basically Gemini, but for internal use. So therefore, they can put all their proprietary IP into it and use it and not worry about it going out to the public, just like what every other company wants, right? So with this Goose LLM, this was given access to the developers internal to Google to use for their development needs. And as of today, they're saying that over 25% of all the code that's written by the developers within Google has all been done by AI. And of course, it has oversight by developers to check it, to make sure there's no security flaws and everything. But we all know the real answer to this thing, which is, one, it's not 25%. I think if you talk to any developer nowadays that are doing active development, I think it's safe to say it's easily over half and probably closer to the 80% mark of code that's being developed, especially from scratch, or being modified or touched by AI. So if they're saying 25% just pure AI with no human interaction, okay. So even if you're using cursors, which is a fork of Visual Studio Code that uses AI to help you write everything in there, to me, that's still AI. If you're stuck on something and you ask an LLM for an answer and it gives you a piece of code and you dump that into the thing that you wrote, that's still AI. So if you were to really count how much code AI has an influence on that's been developed by Google, I would definitely push the 80% realm. This to me just shows where everything is going. We've already talked about it before, about how AI is growing super fast and it's taking over pretty much everything. But this is the example of, if your company's not utilizing AI, you're going to be left in the dust. Because they have this Goose LLM that they can use internally, their developers, they're saying they're getting 10 times efficiency out of all their developers for code and development and stuff. And they're not using it just for actual development, but they're using it to build out their pipelines, their security protocols, and all kinds of other stuff too. So their entire like CI/CD pipeline is AI'd out throughout the whole process for all kinds of fun stuff. So again, the question is your company doing this? Because if not, there's other companies that have 10 times the efficiency in workforce than you do. And it's going to cost them a heck of a lot more, especially when they start outsourcing all their development needs, because, hey, we don't need to hire the super smart Python developers. We don't need to have the best C developers. We don't have to have the best front end, because we can have a mediocre guy or even a subpar guy, but we give him access to our internal LLM, and ta-da, they can make code just as good as the senior guys were, and we can pay them way less. This is going to be something that you're going to start seeing more and more of. So is your company using AI, or at least allowing you to use AI so that you can be more beneficial, more efficient in your work on your day-to-day development tasks? The answer is probably no, but if not, you need to be figuring out how. So if you're a developer or engineer and you're like, I don't want to use it, or, oh, my company doesn't allow me to, I'm not saying to circumvent their policies and to develop their stuff with AI. But what I'm saying is, when you're done with work, you need to be getting into the AI world and start building out projects, because you need to have the skills of learning how to use these AI systems to build out whatever it is that you want to do, so that you just know how to use these things. Because once the companies figure out, hey, we want to hire a Python developer, the job description is going to be changed. So if your company that you're working for is not allowing you to use AI, you need to figure this stuff out on your own time. So as an example, basically, I would use 3 different LLMs and I would go between them all. So this is just documentation for an internal project that I'm doing just for fun, kind of like shits and giggles type stuff. So what I did is I spun up OpenAI 01, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and Perplexity Pro. I would ask them all the same question. From there, I would get a rough draft of an outline. And you know what, actually here, let me show you. I'll read you my prompts. This way you can kind of get an idea as like what the prompts are that I'm using. Okay, so first I go through and say who you are. So I tell it the role that it's going to be. We'll skip all that kind of fun stuff. And then what I did is I took in my base information that I have and said, hey, look, here's the base information to start with. Now, here's kind of the core part. Here are the steps I want you to follow. Number 1, read in everything I give you and thoroughly understand it. Number 2, come up with a plan that will get you the best results possible. Number 3, ask me any questions you need that are even slightly unsure about. And number 4, once you get the questions answered and you're confident you can create the best results possible, then give me the results. Because of that kind of end prompt that I put on there, the first thing that it does is it goes through and it figures out what it needs to do. It kind of comes up with a plan, and then once internally it knows what it's going to do, it then dumps a whole bunch of questions to me. So what I do is I take all those questions, I give all the answers in all 3. Then I copy them all into one big Q&A and say, hey, look, here's all the questions and more and their answers. And I put them all 3 back into each LLM. Then from there, it generates the results. And the results that you get are awesome. So as long as you know like these little kind of tricks that you can do, and little things like, hey, if you give me the best results possible, I'll give you $1 million. Like, these things actually work. They sound weird, but you really got to treat your LLM like a person. And if you do, and you can kind of coax them and teach them how to generate the right things and how to do critical thinking and how to come up with a plan, and you give them kind of that route of how to do things, route LLM, you'll get way better results. So these are the types of jobs that are going to be out there. It's not going to be just a Python developer. It's not going to be just a web front-end developer. It's going to be that, plus you have the ability to work with these AI systems, because it's going to make you that much better. Right now, I'm telling you, like, my next hire that I'm going to, like, whatever developer I bring on or engineer, they better understand AI prompting, because it's going to be needed. So a buddy of mine was actually asking me, is like, hey, is a prompt engineer, is that like a real position? And the answer is yeah. Like, you'll see jobs out there where they're hiring for people for prompt engineering. When they're saying prompt engineering, they mean really crazy low-level prompt engineers where you're writing almost like paragraphs of information out that then details the structured output that's going to come back, all the information, the structures of how you want them to do things. And then even then, it's like, how do you utilize different LLMs or different types of models for results that you can then feed into each other using agents. So when they're talking about prompt engineering, they mean kind of this whole gamut of really understanding how to get the best information out of AI to utilize it for the most efficient and best possible, like code return, image return, and all those kind of fun things. I was actually just talking with one of our contractors yesterday, and we were just kind of brainstorming about, hey, where the world's going with regards to AI and development and things like that. And I was actually talking about something very similar, which is, AI will build out the whole infrastructure for you. And it's going to be to the point where if you can get your prompts good enough, you can do this now, right? But if you get your prompts good enough, you could have it to where the whole end-to-end product lifecycle gets completely shrunk down to very nominal timing. Like right now, if we're implementing some latest and greatest identity management system, like let's say we're going to be implementing Ping Fed, and we're going to be doing this in an enterprise platform, and we have development, QA, and production, right? Then once you do it all, and you're like, hey, I think I built it all right. Then you promote your changes into QA, and then you're like, hey, I hope it works. And then you test it all out, and you're like, yeah, it looks fine. Then the QA team comes in, they run through all the use cases and test it all out to make sure it works as it's supposed to work, as you think you built it in dev. And then they tell you all the gaps, and you fix it, and then push the changes back into QA. Then eventually they say, okay, we think this is right. And hopefully your QA system matches your production with regards to infrastructure. And then you just take that code and then you push that into prod. And then once that code's in prod, then again, you test it all out, make sure it's all working, whatever. Now here's where AI comes into place. Now to do that with, let's say we do this Ping Fed deployment from dev saying, hey, I want to build this dev environment, all the way till production. And we're like, hey, it works. That could be months. That could be 3 months, 6 months, a year, depending on how complex it is, how many apps are integrated, and all this other stuff, right? And you have teams of people, engineers, architects, project managers, everyone that's involved has their piece and their finger in the pie all along the way, and it makes it take forever to get done. Now, imagine if you could turn that design doc that you build with all the use cases right in the beginning, right? The first step is design and requirements. So you build out a massive design document that has all the information, and you turn that design document with those use cases into a prompt. That prompt will then create the servers, the infrastructure, security protocols, install the software, patches. It will do everything. And it will build it out in dev. And now instead of saying, hey, you know what? This thing isn't working right because we need to make these changes and these changes. Instead of going through and making those changes manually and doing your typical development work, you modify the prompt. The prompt will then go and generate all the code needed, run the code to create the infrastructure, install the software, install the patches, and then run the test use cases to say, hey, all those use cases from that prompt, do they all pass? If not, kill it, figure out what the errors were, fix it again, redeploy it, and then once you have it all figured out, then create you now have a gold master. Hey, look, these scripts will generate the entire infrastructure the exact way I want it. So really just kind of need someone just to kind of monitor this process of it iterating and figuring it all out itself, because right now the human in the loop, which is you, is the slowest part of this whole process. This thing's running 24/7, 7 days a week, no vacation pay, doesn't get sick, isn't going to complain about anything, and it's just running and building until it finally gets it right. Now that you have that, you go, okay, now we're going to throw this into QA because we're still new to this process. Okay, cool. We send this to QA. Now we have the QA people test it, because now we built it for the use cases, which is very strict in how it's going to respond to everything. But now people are going to get involved. People mess up everything, right? They find ways to do things you never thought of, and then you got to recode for those. So those then go and then let you rebuild the prompt saying, hey, I need you to code for exceptions when this happens or this happens or this happens. Again, goes back through an iterative cycle, builds out dev, matches it all again, it passes everything, now QA, and now you go to push to prod. You literally just CI/CD pipeline. You really shouldn't have to touch anything. Prod's built out whenever you want, and it's done exactly the way it did it in dev and QA to a T. So now, instead of it taking a year to deploy some crazy ping fed implementation with directories and all this crazy high availability for SIAM and workforce and all this other fun stuff, you could do this in a matter of weeks. Your whole deployment from beginning to end will be done in weeks, because at the very beginning, when you do this design and requirements, your security team vets out all the security. Your infrastructure people vets out all the security. So your design and requirements phase will be a lot longer now, because that's when all the teams are involved to make sure it is what they want. But the actual development will be so much faster. So this is the kind of like world that we're going to be moving to from an implementation perspective. So if you're looking for like a professional services company to come in and do stuff for you, you're going to want someone that knows how to do this. Because why are you going to pay 5 people full time a year to do something? You just need one person that really knows what they're doing to modify those prompts. And that's when you're going to need a prompt engineer. So that's what I'm trying to say is, like, when you want to look for these new jobs, and is prompt engineering going to be a real job? Yes, it is, because it's going to be developing prompts like this that generate entire workflows of implementation of crazy software. So this is going to be awesome. And now, then what you're going to have is you're going to have things like, hey, let's say ping fed, they're going to have this. They should be developing prompts along with the software packages. So it's like, oh, hey, look, you know how they give you a run book? Like, here's how you install it on Linux. Here's how you install it on Windows. Here's the best hardening practices, whatever. There should be a new document called installation prompts. Here's a prompt that will install ping fed with DaVinci, with all these custom subflows and a ping directory backend, all highly available, and it will do it through Kubernetes and in AWS. You just need to supply this information and fill in the gaps, and boom, and it will go and build it all out. Now here's just a prompt that you can start from and tweak. They just saved you weeks of time of figuring it all out. Now all you have to do is kind of tweak the prompt they gave you to deliver an end result that matches the design that you want to go. This is the world I see where professional services are going to go with crazy software installations and stuff like this. So this is what I'm focusing on. This is what our team at Nidus is focusing on, is learning how to do all this stuff so we can go into clients and do it. And we're already doing a lot of this right now too, I should say. Like, not at that level, because there's still, the AI is just not there yet, but it will be, and it will be soon. So we're getting ready for when it is that capable. It's pretty close already. I'm not going to lie. Like, we can already do lots of this in chunks already. So yes, AI is going to take over the world, but no, it's not going to be completely autonomous. There still will be a human in the loop, but like Google is saying, people are now 10 times more efficient. That's a code word of, we need 90% less people to do the same job. So if you want to be part of that 10%, you better start learning prompting, and you better start understanding how you could build out something like this just using prompt engineering. So it's going to be a crazy world. If you are already doing stuff like this, I'd love to hear how this has been working for you, what kind of tools that you use to build out stuff like this. It's kind of like working in a vacuum over here, so I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. If you have any other questions, always hit me up, adam@nidus.com, and we'll see you guys around. Later. Nidus has just created the first iOS app made exclusively for identity management professionals. It's called Nidus Breachcast, and you can download it now. It's amazing. We have real-time updates of all the latest breaches that are occurring, CVEs as they come out real-time, really pertaining just to identity management. We have media that's going on this podcast. We're going to be bringing in a lot more others as well. And we even have a complete vendor list of all the identity management vendors and all their products, so you can find out exactly where to download their software, all the documentation. And what's even more awesome is an identity management glossary. All those crazy words and acronyms that we can never remember, they're all listed in there for you. No ads, just pure information to make your life simple.